Now, the United Kingdom is one of the few nations on earth where they want 16-year-olds to vote. And 16-year-olds can also participate in the military. So, in other words, society understands that these people are intelligent enough to make their own decisions, especially on things that influence the nation state. However, they are not intelligent enough to go on social media and read about Donald Trump. You see, this is the actual problem that's happening in the UK. The government even has what they like to call a nudging department. So the nudging department is when, despite the fact that Britain is a democracy, like sometimes people think incorrectly. And they need a little bit of nudge. They need a little bit of incentive in order to think the correct things about global warming, about immigration, about COVID. And so they want to actually control not just what their own people do, but also what their own people think. And they were absolutely horrified when Brexit happened. They were absolutely horrified when they saw that Donald Trump managed to win the election in the United States. Because despite the fact that the leftist governments controlled all of the mainstream media, like back then you turned on the television and you'd only hear left-leaning narratives, people went online, they went on various forums, they talked to each other, and they came up with different conclusions than what the government managed to push. And so that is extremely dangerous for their democracy. This is why the United Kingdom right now is trying to go after 4chan. Like, notice, they're not actually geo-blocking 4chan from the UK, which they could do. Instead, what they're doing is they're trying to sue 4chan in order to cripple them financially or to scare them into compliance. And this is why they created Ofcom, which is basically a massive censorship apparatus that gets to decide what is and isn't allowed to be on the internet. Now, initially, they said it's about pornography, but when you actually look at what it's doing, it also censored things that have to do with immigration. It also censored sensitive content. And so they generally want teenagers to be indoctrinated by the school system, the mainstream media, the television. And there are British politicians that said exactly this. There was a British politician that was asked on GB News, if you want 16 years old to vote and they can't go online, like how are they going to make their decision? And he literally said, well, they can watch the BBC. They can watch The Guardian. And so this is one of the main reasons that they don't want people under 16 to go on social media. The other reason is obviously control. If you're required to show an ID every single time you go online, then what that means is that the government now has the possibility of simply blocking your ID. So you haven't really committed any crime, but because, you have wrong things, they can simply Nigel Farage you. Like this happened to a British politician, Nigel Farage, all of a sudden he got debanked. And when he looked into it, why he got debanked, it wasn't because he did anything illegal. It wasn't because he was a risk factor, like he was a liability when it came with his cash. It was simply because of his politics regarding Brexit. And so activists pressured the banks behind closed doors in order to deplatform him. Now, again, the infrastructure of mass censorship didn't exist, but imagine what would happen if the government or the activist would simply decline that you're a dangerous person, your ID stops working, and all of a sudden you cannot make or access social media accounts. So in other words, you're not really banned from Twitch, you're not really banned from X. Like the platform would allow you to create an account, but when you're using your ID as a British person in order to sign up, they simply say that your ID is rejected. It also gives a lot of power to the corporations that do the robust age verification. As we know, there aren't that many companies that can do that, and they're very expensive. It usually charges something like $2 per verification. And so if you have 100,000 people verifying and using a social media platform, you can just make the calculation and you can see how much do these robust age verification companies make. But they also have a lot of power. There is absolutely no law forcing them to work with a social media platform. And since there are so few, imagine if all of these 4 robust age verification companies would basically say, we don't want to work with X anymore because X hosts problematic content. So in other words, X doesn't do anything illegal, Ofcom doesn't go after them, no government is upset, but this is just like private companies doing what private companies do. And they just decide, okay, well, we're now going to provide our service for the platform X. And because X cannot now robustly verify and make sure that the people accessing their websites are teenagers, they're in violation of Ofcom. And so notice how they're creating another bottleneck, which again can be used in order to crack down on companies that simply go against the status quo. This may not happen this year, this may not happen in 5 years, but like 15 years down the line, there is absolutely no guarantee, no law that what I'm saying right now cannot happen. Also, private companies, they benefit as well. Companies like Facebook, the dead internet theory is actually real. A lot of YouTube videos that talk about it immediately get flagged as a conspiracy theory, which is very weird. You know, like there are a lot of hypotheses going around out there. Why isn't this particular one so damaging? Well, the reality is that the internet may not be dead, right? Like, it's a little bit of an exaggeration, it's a hyperbole. But the reality is you literally cannot tell nowadays what is something that a human made versus what is something that an AI made. When you look at a username, you do not know if it's a real person behind the screen. Now, this affects advertisers a lot because advertisers pay money for their brand to be advertised to people. And if their brand gets advertised to bots and it's discovered, social media companies are at a big liability. And so, by robustly verifying every single person that goes there, they make sure that the individual is actually a human being and not a bot. Obviously, they don't care about children because children cannot be advertised to due to various regulations in the United States. You can't harvest their data, you can't target advertise them, so Facebook doesn't view them as people. And so this is why the government is so obsessed with keeping children off of social media. There are various competing interests from people that actually own or have stock in the robust age verification companies, from political parties that have an interest of being the only source of information for the young generation, as well as, you know, various religious organizations and moral busybodies, including Muslims, certain brands of Christians that genuinely view pornography being evil, and they are being bamboozled by this new type of law. Now, the interesting question is, why are they rushing it? Because as you notice here, the Lords in the United Kingdom is trying to push Kier Starmer to go faster. Now, it's interesting because these types of laws actually require a lot of thinking. If you, quote-unquote, go faster, you risk running into privacy issues. The European Union recently released an app which was supposed to be like a digital wallet, but it got hacked even before it was released to the public. And this is one of the biggest problems with this type of system. If you have to use your actual data, your actual ID in order to log on to a database, if that database manages to get hacked, your entire identity is stolen. And so if you create a system without the safety function in mind, then if you force an entire nation of people to use that system, well, you can end up with huge lawsuits and you can end up with huge economic and social disruptions. Not that the people that are pushing for this actually care. But if the current system that's already implemented in the United Kingdom starts actually settling in and people actually understand what they have traded in exchange for quote-unquote safety, the argument that we're doing this to protect the children may not work in the future. Because once the children become 16 and they're going to be able to vote, they will realize that, hold on a little bit, like the system didn't protect me at all from going on social media. Like I already went there, my friends went there, we actually know how to bypass all of the safety guards. And so the system is not designed to actually keep us safe. But my mother or someone that I know did have their information stolen. Or someone that I know actually posted something racist online and they got arrested. The system is actually designed in order to make sure that no new websites pop up. You know, the forum that I used to like browsing when I was a kid is now shut down because it can't afford the huge costs in order to do the robust age verification. Someone that I know actually had its identity stolen and now has problems with the banks and shit. And so, like, this is a bad idea. And the appetite of the public will actually start dying down. Once a lot of the elderly people with a boomer mindset die, and a lot of young people with a fresh new mindset that actually understand how the internet works manage to vote, it could scare politicians, it could swing polls. And so this is why they're absolutely desperate in order to pass this under Kier Starmer as fast as possible before a new government comes in. Right? So like the whole rushing thing, isn't that there is now a huge danger on the internet that didn't exist before, and we need to stop, teenagers going online as fast as possible? No, the actual danger is that, well, teenagers may actually start being able to vote, and they may say, well, hold on a little bit, we were supposed to be the beneficiaries of this law. In fact, we were actually the victims. Now, you have like certain people from England that have like this type of mentality, which honestly, as an Eastern European, I do not understand it. It baffles my brain. But he is saying that he is glad this is happening. Things need to be a bit more ridiculous before the average person finally understands that our democracy is fake and that we are simply bluffed and bullshitted into things by the spin class. This is not protecting kids, blah, blah, blah. But this is the thing that I'm noticing, right? I'm glad that this is happening. And I've seen the mentality a lot. Like, I'm glad it's happening because soon people will wake up. My question is, like, when exactly do people wake up? Because I've been waiting for that for 20 years, and people do not wake up. Like, it's a lot easier to make the statement that people don't wake up than to say that people do wake up, right? Like, if we go in front of a betting house right now, and you were to actually put your money on it, will people wake up? Which one do you think is the winning ticket? Because I don't think people wake up. You know what I think happens? I think authoritarianism is an extremely stable system if done properly. Look at China. Do people wake up in China? Do people woke up in the Soviet Union? Now, don't get me wrong, like, eventually, sure, like, eventually people do wake up, like, and it's not like necessarily that people wake up because they go on the street and take their country back, like, apparently they did in Hungary. No, it's because, like, these types of systems are extremely expensive to maintain. Like, all of these systems require a very wealthy nation with a government that taxes people a lot in order to maintain the authoritarianism. And so, when the government invests a lot of money into thought policing citizens, they end up not actually investing money in the proper economy, like the things that actually create and generate wealth. And so, over time, the system collapses, not because, like, people have a moral awakening, but simply because the government cannot keep funding and continuing the system. The problem is that by that time, we could probably be dead. I mean, look at Maoist China, right? Like, how long ago was that? If you're a person that caught, like, the Great Leap Forward and managed to survive, you notice that even today, China is not a free society. And by free, I would mean like how America used to be in the 90s. You will not manage to just simply obtain freedom by, quote-unquote, people waking up. What you will have is the same system that will remain there. I mean, it's absurd to think that the government will invest so much money into a mass surveillance infrastructure only to then say, oh, I mean, well, people are now don't like it, so we're going to pull it back. No, the reality is that accelerationism is an interesting theory that if you run your car really fast into a wall, then your car can break through. In some cases it can, but in overwhelmingly amount of cases, the wall wins. 9 out of 10 times, the wall wins. And so you end up with the surveillance apparatus. Now, look at the current situation, right? Like in the United Kingdom right now, you actually have to verify your identity when going on to various websites. How many people are upset about it? How many people are outraged? In fact, there are people supporting it. And the support is even coming from places that you wouldn't expect. Like, for example, Academic Agent. Sargon of Akkad, doesn't agree with the implementation, because I listened to the Lotus Eaters. He doesn't agree with the way it's implemented. But the morality of the thing where the government is the daddy, and the daddy gets to tell Sargon the child how he should police his children, is something that is morally respectable in the United Kingdom. And so, no, I do not think that people will rise up. I do not think that people will have a moral awakening. I think people will just put up with it. Let me know what you guys think, though. And as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.